Hey everyone, this is Charles Muhlbauer. I am a discovery sales specialist coming out with a discovery guide to help all those account executives and sales development representatives and any sales professional help deepen their discovery effectiveness and their sales prowess. You can always reach me on LinkedIn. I'm currently working at CB Insights. One piece of advice regarding discovery is to not uncover issues with your prospect, but instead to begin to raise them and always raise more issues that the prospect may or may not have thought about, and that will help you with your discovery conversations. Thank you very much for having me.
Cool. That's great, Charles. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for correcting the pronunciation of your name that I screwed up in the intro. I appreciate that very much. Muhlbauer it is, so you know better than me. So what the heck is Discovery, man? I read all your stuff here, and I'm like, Discovery, is that short for disco? Is that a dance that all salespeople got to do? Or talk to me about Discovery, man.
You know what it is, actually. Discovery is a dance. Discovery is the process of empowering the prospect to sell themselves. And discovery, a lot of folks try to uncover things from the prospect through the discovery process, which I can understand. But as I mentioned in the beginning, the best way to help uncover problems, issues, challenges that the prospect may or may not have is to raise them yourself through a variety of ways and variety of avenues to do that. And of course, just to give you some context, as a salesperson, maybe as a new salesperson, it may be very difficult to stay present and to listen to people. I don't have that skill 100% of the time, but I think as you get more confident and care less about the outcome, be more yourself and be more present in a conversation, you're able to listen better, and then as a result, naturally ask better questions. So. Discovery is a whole bunch of different things, but that's the meat of it, I'd say.
Excellent.
Yeah,
So being present in a conversation is very hard. I know that that's, when I'm training new sales folks and I'm coaching folks, it's like, just listen. People will tell you what you need to hear if you pay attention and you're really present with them and you're really there. So I appreciate that you said that. But how do you get there, man? I mean, this is hard work. This is not easy. And first, before you even answer that for me, how did you learn so much about discovery, man? Like, what was your first, when did you discover discovery, if you will?
sure. That's actually an awesome question, Phil. So my first sales role, I was in sales for my first sales role. I was trying to sell an offering to the investment community for about 6 months, and I simply was not able to sell. The reason why I was not able to sell was because I was being taught by my coworkers, rightfully so, and my colleagues and my managers, we want you to make sure to ask these questions, right? And these are the questions that you should be asking. So I would listen to other salespeople on their calls and understand, how they asked questions, and I'd write down all the questions. And during my conversations with any prospect, whether any type of prospect we had that would have been a fit for our offering, I was really mimicking what the other salespeople were doing, pretty much word for word, concentrating more on what I had to ask and what I had to do versus listening to the actual answer. And so a quick story. So this was happening for about 6 months in my first sales role. So I had one conversation with a founder of a venture capital fund, and I was asking him question after question and so on and so forth. And in the middle of the conversation, he said, "Charles, are you in sales?" Like in the middle of a conversation, he said, "Charles, are you in sales?" I said, "Yeah," I was taken aback. And he said, "That's weird because you're not listening to a word I'm saying." And I couldn't believe that happened. And I was happy that it happened, but of course it was a very awkward moment. And I went home that night, and after not being able to sell anything pretty much for 6 months, the firm still kept me there because they knew how hard I worked. But I came home that night and I said to myself, I think I know what's wrong, and I think I'm just not being me. Everyone's telling me to do this, to do that, and I just wasn't being myself at all. And I quite frankly can't do any worse than what I've been doing. Right? I've hit rock bottom. I can't get any lower here. So why don't I wake up in the morning, forget everything I learned, pick up the phone, and when I have a conversation with a prospect, just be myself. What does be myself mean? I sing professionally outside of work. I like to make jokes. I like to use humor when I can. I'm a positive person. And so when I started these conversations with prospects, I would throw in, even in the beginning of the conversation, that I sing at weddings. I'd be like, by the way, before we kick off the call here, I see you're in Orlando, right? I just sang at a wedding there or something like that. Or I was recently, I've sang at weddings there before, or something that I thought was applicable to me. And then we started getting into a conversation about what the prospect is passionate about outside of work. And that allowed me personally, it's different for everybody, that allowed me to let loose and stay present and be myself. And then all of a sudden, all the questions that I was told to ask, right, they came out of my mouth in a very natural way, the way I wanted to do it. So if I felt like I wanted to ask the prospect a weird question that in the past I would just ask while feeling weird, but was taught to ask it, now I'm asking questions that I think are weird, and before I ask them, I'm going to say, hey, Phil, listen, I have to ask you this question. I know it might sound a little weird and a little bit, kind of out of bounds. So I guess, but when you think about X, how does that affect Y? And that allowed me to take my insecurities about the tough questions that I wanted to ask and transfer them over to the prospect. They're called humbling disclaimers. I learned them from a book called Question-Based Selling, which was one of my favorite sales books. And humbling disclaimers changed the game for me because it allowed me to share with the prospect any insecurity I might be having. Doesn't matter if it's related to a tough question that I want to ask, or if it's a story that I want to share, anything. Humbling disclaimers really allowed me to, change my sales effectiveness and turn it around 180 degrees. So that's one story that really helped me understand to be present. That's the answer to one of your questions. The answer to the answer to the second part of your question was, how do you do it? I created a roadmap for myself. I like to give this analogy. Phil, if you and I were really close friends, and hopefully maybe we will be, and I want to drive to your house, I don't need Waze. I don't need Google Maps if I live near you or whatever. I just know how to get to your house. And if somebody cuts me off on the road, or if the road is blocked, or my tank is empty, or my car breaks down, I'm totally okay because I know where I want to go. And I built a roadmap for myself that's stuck in my head currently, that's pretty much ingrained in my head, that when I'm having a conversation with any prospect, I know how to go from point A to point B no matter what happens to me in the middle. So as a specific example, if a salesperson is used to asking a prospect after they have an upfront contract or anything like that, if they're used to asking a prospect, hey, Phil, tell me about your role. I'd love to understand what you do. And then Phil, as the prospect, you don't want to tell me about what you do. You want to know more about me, right? Well, Charles, tell me about what you do first. That would be very helpful. A lot of salespeople that makes them uncomfortable because they're like, wait, this is my structure, and now I'm like caught off guard. What am I going to say? But and that's okay. That's a normal reaction if your sales call is linear and your framework is stuck. But if you have a roadmap where like, okay, I want this call to go in the following order, but if Phil but if Phil wants to change the order, that's okay. It's like different modules you can change that are flexible. That's okay. I'll move this here and I'll move that there. But then I always know where to go back to, and I always know how to transition. And that allowed me to stay so present and understand how to move the call along, ideally the way I'd like it to go.
Well, and it makes sure that you cover each important piece of the call too, because getting thrown off often means, oh crap, that means now I have to be on step 6 of this, to your point about not being present, instead of, well, hold on, that might be a slight diversion, but here's an on ramp. I can get right back on and I can talk about this. Hey, great. I'll happily tell you about me. And after I do, would it be okay if you share some more about you? Okay, cool. And now here we go, right? And I've seen that, and I find that's very effective. I find that roadmap idea is very effective, and yet so many don't use it. Why is that? Lack of practice, lack of preparation? I mean, why do people not have a roadmap for their sales calls more often, Charles? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, it's two reasons. One, they haven't thought of one. That's the obvious reason. Two, if they have thought of one, maybe they are afraid to use it. I find, Phil, that, of course, for more experienced salespeople, there are exceptions to every rule. They have less of a problem with the following. But fear really plays a big role in a salesperson's head. And I know Sandler training refers it to as head trash. We all have head trash. We all have head trash. We're afraid to ask questions. We're afraid to upset somebody. We're afraid to take the conversation in a way that the prospect doesn't expect. And I think fear plays a big role in how and whether or not a salesperson will actually execute a roadmap, even if they've created one on their own. They're afraid. But one of the best things about humbling disclaimers, if I am afraid to do something, Phil, I will say on the phone that I'm afraid to do something. Actually, one of the salespeople that I coach over at CB Insights, is afraid to talk about money. So we came up with our own humbling disclaimer for him, where he says, "Hey, Phil, admittedly, the next part of the conversation is my least favorite part. I was brought up as a child never to talk about money, but that's exactly why I got hired to do this position. So with that in mind, is it okay if I ask you whether or not you guys have a budget in place for this?" Right? So that's that's a long...
That's awesome. No, but that's awesome, though, because that's real. If that's your style, though, that's so real and so refreshing, and yet so not done.
Yeah, it's not done because it's hard to do. But I feel that when one individual, a salesperson, lets the prospect know, hey, I'm insecure about X. It's human behavior to want to help that person. Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. And then the prospect on the other line, their guard goes down. They're like, wow, this person's being real with me. They're telling me what they're afraid of, what they're concerned about themselves, afraid to ask questions. So much so that I had a prospect tell me, Charles, you don't need to keep telling me how afraid you are to ask me questions. It's okay. You can ask me any question you want. And all of a sudden, that was great, right? So that's what I want. If a prospect tells me that, that's great. I'm in the clear. So I use them all the time. That's helped me out a lot. And fear plays a role. But if you transfer that fear over to the prospect and get out of your head and get out of your own way, that really helps a lot. We all get in our own way, right?
Yeah, for sure. I know I absolutely
do.
So that's a great point. So what about so I know we're talking about discovery, but I'm wondering, does email play any role, video play any role in your discovery process at all, Charles?
Well, it's a great question. In short, the answer is yes. When we're writing emails to prospects, let's say we're not prospecting, okay, but we are in the middle of a deal process, etc. And let's say that there are times the prospect isn't responding, or we expected an agreement to come back by a certain day, but it hasn't come back, and maybe there's some miscommunication. I definitely will use discovery and humbling disclaimers again in the email. So one of those might sound like, and it depends what stage of the deal you're in. Let's say the prospect hasn't responded. Of course, there are a number of ways to do this, but I might say, hey, Phil, I know we weren't able to connect last week. I could be way out of bounds here, parentheses, sometimes that happens to me, but I'm getting the sense that either you are too busy or this is not a real priority for the team. Am I off here? Charles, right? Something like that incorporates a I'm sensing type of quote, right? I'm sensing that this is the case. Am I way off here? And it includes like a humbling disclaimer. I could be way out of bounds and so on and so forth. We actually like to use humor in a lot of these emails. One of the sales associates that I coach, he had a prospect of his intended to get on a call. The prospect didn't make it. And then the sales associate said, "Hey, Bob, sorry we weren't able to connect. I promise I'm a good person in real life, parentheses, at least that's what my mom says," right? Added some humor into the email. The prospect responded immediately. "I really appreciate it. I'm so sorry that I didn't make it." Right? So I think a lot of this, Phil, and this shouldn't surprise you. You've been doing this way longer than I have, so I have a lot to learn from you. When any salesperson incorporates humanity, humility, humor, authenticity, if we make a mistake, we'll say we made a mistake. That's something that prospects are not used to. And I think salespeople, depending on their level of experience, especially in the beginning, they feel like they have to wear this professional guise or mask, if you will, and to hide something about themselves that's really them. And that's not the way to do it. There's definitely a healthy balance to be professional, but also be yourself. And I think the more yourself you are, first of all, the more fun you're going to have in your job, right? And the more fun you have, the better you'll be, the better off you'll be, the better off everybody will be.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Well, I love that you do use some video. One of our sponsors for the show is actually our friends at Vidyard, because, you know, email isn't dead, but wow, it can really be boring if you don't inject some humanity, some humility. If you want to jazz it up, though, and you want to take it to the next level, I encourage you to use Vidyard. Vidyard can help you record and send sales videos like Charles is talking about, with humbling disclaimers, to connect with those prospects, to move those open opportunities along, and to get you closing more deals. Now, there's 3 ways that video can work for you. First, put a face with your name, right? Put a face with your name. Hold up a whiteboard, record your face, your screen, or do both for those first touch prospecting videos, helping you move it further along faster because they know that video is just for you. Now, if I just had a great discovery call like Charles is talking about today, I might write that takeaway, that thing that I learned, on the whiteboard so they know it's just for them. Secondly, if you're on a sales team and you're a sales leader, share your team's videos. Make sure that they know that inside the outreach tools that you use every single day, that those videos are available not to copy, but instead to inject your own humanity in it, to make it even more personal. Some curated lists so you know what to say at each phase, so you can practice being yourself and getting comfortable, being humble. And lastly, to keep track of which opportunities are engaging with those videos. You've probably got some great videos, but not all are performing. For those ones that don't, or when they do actually finally open and click those videos, now you know the exact right time to follow up. You can look in your CRM, you can see all of this, and you can see exactly how to follow up. Now, if you want to check this out, go to vidyard.com/philgerb. It's absolutely free. You can check it out. Now, Vidyard can't keep up with all these promo codes, so you just go to the website, vidyard.com/philgerb. It's completely free, and if you sign up now, you get the high conversion virtual sales playbook. Start using video to grow your pipeline, your business, and make your discovery even better at vidyard.com/philgerb. So, Charles, I gotta know, man. So what happens, though, if sometimes our prospects, our clients, those folks that we're talking to are like, dude, enough with the questions. I don't have time for discovery. I don't have time to answer all your questions, man. Come on, just get to the point. Like, what's the price? What do we do?
Wow. Okay. Great question. 2 points. Number one, we want to do something in order to prevent that from happening, right? We can do a lot of things to prevent things like that from happening. Do they work all the time? Of course not. There are a few things in sales that do work all the time. This is not one of them, but they do enhance the probability of preventing that from happening. And that is the beginning of your call. So if we're having a conversation, Phil, glad we could connect. Do we have a hard stop at 30 minutes? Yeah, that's fine. Great. And I say, by the way, Phil, the purpose of this conversation from my end is I know a little bit about you guys. Certainly not a whole lot. Naturally, you're probably going to have a lot of questions about what we do, which I'm happy to share with you. And of course, I'm probably going to have, Phil, a number of questions. Some of them might be direct for you along the way, just to see whether or not we are a fit. Would that be okay? Yeah, sure. And then, of course, Phil, at the risk of stating the obvious, there are really one of 2 outcomes from this conversation. Either one, you feel and I feel that there is a potential fit here and we could talk about next steps, or either one of us feel that it's probably not the best fit, and then we can just part ways and take it from there. Those are really one of the two, one of the two outcomes from this conversation. Does that work for you? Yeah, cool. And Phil, what else did you want to get out of the call today aside from that agenda? Well, I really wanted to do X, Y, Z. Sure, we'll get to that. Not a problem. Is it all right if I ask a couple questions in the beginning to kick it off? Yeah, sure. So right now I'm taking control, at least of the conversation, so that that type of thing doesn't happen. Small sales nugget: the person that asks the questions in sales and life, the person who's asking the questions is the one who's in control of the conversation. So you want to do your best to. It's a give and take, like you said at the beginning of the call, Phil. It's a dance. You want to make sure that you have the ability to do that. Okay, back to your question. What if that doesn't work? Doesn't matter. Prospects like Charles, get to the point. I want to talk about pricing. I will say, not a problem. What would you like to talk about? If they want to talk about pricing, sure, we can go over pricing. But I will ask them, what part of our offering were you most interested in? Right? So I want to kind of gauge what they know and what they don't know. Well, I don't really know much about your offering. Oh, okay. Well, I could show you the pricing, but it probably won't make a lot of sense to you. Would it be okay if we maybe take a step back and talk about which part of the offering might be most helpful for you, so I don't give you some generic pricing information? Or would that be okay? Right? It's kind of like a lot of permission-based asks. But if a prospect says, "Listen, I want to do X," I'll say no problem, and I'll ask, which part of the offering did you want? I want to see a walkthrough. I want to see a demo. Absolutely, happy to show you a demo. As you can imagine, our offering is quite comprehensive. Was there a part of the platform that you thought was most interesting for you? Or would you rather just go over like a generic kind of sales demo that may not, go over something that might be a priority for you? I guess which one would you rather see? Obviously, you want to do that in maybe a better tone where doesn't come across so rude. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like agreeing to do something, but also asking a question. Sure, how would you like to do it? How would you like to do it? Sure, what would you like to see? Sure, what do you know about us? Kind of thing. So that helps those conversations along. I will say also, Phil, that you will have times and prospects that are just like, show me what you got. I don't care. I don't have time. And I'll just be like, no problem. Because some prospects I feel, and I posted about this on LinkedIn a while ago, there's sometimes situations where a prospect will come in hot and want to first believe that your product does what it says it does. Maybe they went on a trial behind your back, like let's say your offering has a free trial and you don't know that they were on the trial, and you hopped on the phone with them and they said, "Phil, I've been on your product for like 3 days, and honestly, it's complicated. I don't understand it, and I don't know what you guys are doing. So can you help me walk through this product because I want to understand it?" Right? So some prospects first want to see that what you do has some credibility so that they can calm themselves down, and only then they will allow you to ask them questions. Right? So you'll have those situations as well. But I think the point of all these 3 points that I'm making is you gotta, if the prospect's coming in hot, you gotta diffuse it, right? If they're coming in hot, they have a very high level resistance wall. You just got to chip it down slowly, 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 slowly. And then ultimately the conversation can turn around and become really, really warm. I remember one quick story, Phil. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. I'm not used to talking a lot. One quick story. A prospect came in, wanted to see a demo. I thought the proper thing to do in that situation was to just ask him discovery questions, and he yelled at me. He yelled over the phone, "Charles, what are you doing asking me these questions? I came here to see a demo, and I want to see a demo." Now, when that happened, I shut up. I was quiet. I didn't say a word. I didn't even respond. I didn't say a word for maybe 15, 20 seconds, and there was an awkward silence over the phone. You know, when somebody pushes you, you got to like, don't push back, but you got to stay back. So I was silent for about 20, 25 seconds. And all of a sudden he said, "Charles, I'm really sorry. I'm having a bad day." I'm like, "No problem." He's like, "I'd like to see a demo, and that's okay. You can ask me some questions as well." So you got to feel it out.
Yeah. Wow. And sometimes the opposite of mirroring, slowing it down, or speeding it up, right? If people are too slow sometimes, is a great strategy. And offering them the ability to think is super key. You actually said in one of your posts, and I love this, you said empowering your prospects to think is true discovery.
You
And I
just said
think
better
that's
than I
so
did now.
interesting. Yeah, well, you wrote it, man. I'm just reading it. But it's so true. I really get that. You know, the more that we can make people think, it elevates us. It shows us as a peer, not just as a service provider. I think
Right.
that's super important. And secondly, it also helps them discover what's going on. Like, what is my real problem here? Did my boss, sometimes people come in hot because they just got to check the box that says I watched 3 demos. And sometimes they come in hot because they're having a crappy day or a crappy week, or someone just stole their lunch. I mean, we don't know what's going on, but we have to detach from that and be comfortable. And I think that's where your roadmap really helps us. But how do we, other than silence, which I think is beautiful, how else do we get our prospects to discover what we need them to discover so that we can see if there's a real fit?
Sure. Well, you just touched upon it, Phil, and getting them to think. You can't get somebody to think without you, the salesperson, understanding that you have to slow down. A lot of prospects will want a salesperson to skip steps, right? We have a way that we sell, and they have a way that they buy, right? They're not necessarily mismatched, but in order to get somebody to think, you have to slow down. And in order for a prospect to feel comfortable sharing what they wouldn't normally share with you, you have to get them to a place where they feel that you know their world. Okay, the way they feel that you know their world is by not just the questions that you ask, but how you actually ask them. So I'll give one example. I'm sure, Phil, you've seen this many times. You most likely do something like this, but it's like a 4 mini step roadmap. At CB Insights here, we talk about also mini roadmaps to ask questions. So we're having a conversation, Phil, and we haven't really gotten deep. We're talking about what you do, etc. I say, Phil, just to give you some context, and I'm getting straight to the point. Phil, just to give you some context, I speak with maybe 2 or 3 heads of sales, just to make it simple. I speak to maybe 2 or 3 heads of sales on a daily basis here at my organization. And as you can imagine, they share with me a variety of challenges, obstacles, or just goals that they feel they need a little help with, ideally in a perfect world. The step 2, they'll share with me A, B, C, and D. Right? These are the problems that they share with me. And then step C is, I'm curious to what extent any of those resonate at all with you. And then step D, and if not, what would you say you're most concerned about when it comes to discovery, or when it comes to sales, or when it comes to prospecting, right? So it's a question that way. It's a very non-threatening type of question because I'm raising issues for them. They're telling me what resonates, what doesn't. If none of them resonate, that's okay too. I could say, cool, what compelled you to take the call today? Because that's really what we help solve, right? So those things help the prospect calm down, listen to you, you know their world. And once you get them to start thinking, any salesperson, any prospect that sees a salesperson get them to think, they respect, and they'll want to talk more to them. Actually, I'll share another quick story. Can I share another quick story, Phil?
Please do.
Yeah. So long time ago, I just shared the story with somebody else the other day. I had prospected into a very large investment firm called Oaktree, and I met with a senior investor there who told me I can come into his office after I gave him a cold call. I sat in his office. It was still new in my sales career, so I still didn't really know how to sell that well. And I walked into his office. Very large, 6'6" gentleman walks in there with a 3-piece suit, sits down, sits in his chair with his arms crossed. I'm actually still close with him to this day. And he looks at me and he says, "Charles, what do you got for me today?" which is very dangerous.
I've
That's a
heard
way,
that.
yeah, that's a way for somebody to take complete control of the conversation. What do you got for me? Right? And I fell for it. So I opened up my laptop. I showed him a demo of the offering. I said, this is what we do. This is what our software looks like. And this is how we help people like you, etc. He sat there and he looks, this is in person. He looks at me and he says to me, Charles, you taught me nothing today. And this is like one of those, another awkward moment, right? And given my comfort that I developed for myself, being myself, as I shared earlier, I said to him, you know what? You're right. I didn't teach you anything. You're 100% right. Is it okay if I start again? And he said, sure. I said, great. Close my laptop. I said, the reason why firms like yours even talk to us in the first place is because they're finding that they have challenges with A, B, C, and D. That's why they talk to us. Is that something that surprises you at all? He's like, no, we talk about that a lot. And then I said, how have you guys been doing? How do you deal with that? How you guys? And we had a conversation. He ended up being a client. Took him a while to be a client, but he ended up being a client. And it made me realize that raising issues and teaching somebody something, not that they necessarily don't know, right? I feel like you'll find trainers teach salespeople, hey, you have to teach something to a prospect that they didn't know before. I mean, your prospects are professionals. The chances that they don't know something huge means they're not good at their job. So it's not about teaching them something that they don't know or never heard of, but teaching them something that resonates, that they know, but maybe they didn't know, they didn't pay attention to so well. They didn't know how poorly it could affect them. They didn't know how big the problem has been getting for other clients, right? It has to resonate a little bit with them. And once you teach something to a prospect that they cannot argue with, you're in. That's like, then you're in the discovery magic. Now you're having a real conversation. You're using humbling disclaimers. You're asking, why is this important? Why is that important, etc. But it's not enough just to learn, hey, these are the best discovery questions. You have to know how to ask them, right? And you have to make it part of your voice and part of who you are.
Yeah, you have to practice that, and I would also say, right, instead of challenger where you got to get in their face, it's really about discovery, right? So maybe that's the book you should be writing, Charles, is The Discovery Sale, how to discover, right, the right way to sell, because I think that's a lot of what you teach, man. I learn a lot from you on LinkedIn all the time, and I'm really excited about your book. So talk to me, when's it coming out? What format? How can we get more of this awesome sauce, dude?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Phil. The book I'm coming out with is an ebook. I guess unfortunately it's not a book where you can read from beginning to end. It is a reference guide by section. So if I want to get better at certain sections of discovery, I'll go to the section and I'll pick, which subsection of that topic I want to see. And the guide is made up of effective questions that I have found that when I ask them, they've really worked well and the prospect would open up. But it's not just the questions to ask, it's about how to ask the question and what's behind the question, when to ask it. And that will allow salespeople to take, one question or one email question and say, oh, I have a demo today. I'm going to ask this question. I would never have thought of asking this question. Or I have an intro call with a prospect today. This is a question I never would have thought of asking, and I liked how Charles is phrasing how to ask this question. I'm going to do that on the next call. And little by little, step by step, right, improving 1% every day, your conversations become more effective. But it is a discovery guide that will be coming out in the next 2 weeks or so. I'm looking forward to it. Actually, I just had a drink with a salesperson who told me that he got a sneak peek of my guide, and he told me that about a month ago he used 2 specific questions in a later stage deal that helped him gain a $65,000 commission check. So
That's all right,
it's going to help somebody.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, cool. So, it's not yet out, folks, but if you want to get to know Charles more, definitely check him out on LinkedIn. It's Charles Muhlbauer, Lbauer. Check him out. Learn from him. I learn discovery stuff from Charles every single time that he posts. Even his comments are super insightful, but it's just discovery. So learn about discovery. Do better on your discovery. Get some of that head trash out of there. Be more yourself. Learn some humbling disclaimers. Empower your prospects to think so you can do true discovery, and know not just the questions to ask, how to ask it, and also the why behind it. Charles, you're a gift, man. I really appreciate you today. Thanks for stopping by and sharing some insights with me.
Thank you, Phil.